Volume 1, Part 1 of Legend Land by Various, as retold by Lyonesse, recorded for LibriVox.org by Esther. Foreword. In those older, simpler days, when reading was a rare accomplishment, our many times great-grandparents would gather round the blazing fire of kitchen or hall on the long dark winter nights, and pass away the hours before bedtime in conversation and story-telling. Those old stories were told again and again. The children learned them in their earliest years, and passed them on to their children and grandchildren in turn. And, as is natural, in all this telling the stories changed little by little. New and more familiar characters were introduced, or a story-teller with more vivid imagination than his fellows would add a bit here and there to make a better tale of it. But in origin most of these old legends date from the very dawn of our history. In a primitive form they were probably told round the camp-fires of that British army that went out to face invading Caesar. Then, with the spread of education, they began to die. When many folk could read and books grew cheap, there was no longer the need to call upon memory for the old-fashioned romances. Yet there have always been those who loved the old tales best, and they wrote them down before it was too late, so that they might be preserved forever. A few of them are retold briefly here. All people should like the old stories. All nice people do. To them I commend these tales of Legend Land, in the hope that they may grow to love them and the countries about which they are written. Lyonesse. The Mermaid of Zeenor. Carved on one of the pews in the church of Zeenor in West Cornwall is a strange figure of a mermaid, depicted with flowing hair, a mirror in one hand and a comb in the other. The Zeenor folk tell a strange story about her. Years and years ago, they say, a beautiful and richly dressed lady used to attend the church sometimes. Nobody knew where she came from, although her unusual beauty and her glorious voice caused her to be the subject of discussion throughout the parish. So attractive was she that half the young men of the village fell in love with her, and one of them, Matthew Trawella, a handsome youth, and one of the best singers in the neighbourhood, determined that he would discover who she was. The beautiful stranger had smiled at him in church one Sunday, and after service he followed her as she walked away towards the cliffs. Matthew Trawella never returned to Zeenor, nor did the lovely stranger ever attend church again. Years passed by, and Matthew's strange disappearance was almost forgotten, when, one Sunday morning, a ship cast anchor off Pendower Cove, near Zeenor. The captain of the vessel was sitting idling on the deck, when he heard a beautiful voice hailing him from the sea. Looking over the side, he saw the mermaid, her long yellow hair floating all around her. She asked him to be so kind as to pull up his anchor, for it was resting upon the doorway of her house under the sea, and she was anxious to get back to Matthew, her husband, and her children. In alarm the captain weighed anchor and stood out to sea, for sailors fear that mermaids will bring bad luck. But later he returned and told the Zeenor folk of Matthew's fate, and they, to commemorate the strange event, and to warn other young men against the wiles of the merry maids, had the mermaid figure carved in the church. And there it is today, for all the world to see, and to prove to those who do not believe the old stories, the truth of poor Matthew Trawella's sad fate. Zeenor is a lovely moorland village in the neighbourhood of some of the wildest scenery in Cornwall. To the south-west rugged moors stretch away to the Land's End. To the north, a quarter of an hour's walk brings you to the coast, with its sheltered coves and its cruel cliffs. Gurnard's Head, one of the most famous of all Cornish promontories, is less than 2 miles away. Grim, remote, yet indescribably fascinating, the country around Zeenor is typical of that far western corner of England, which is swept continually by the great health-giving winds of the Atlantic. In its sheltered valleys flowers bloom all the year round. On its bold hill-tops boulders
Sample complete. Ready to continue?